Classic Art is a betting game by Reiner Knizia, and it has some of the hallmarks that we have come to associate with this designer, such as a fairly abstract core, a simple set of rules, and mechanics that want to be elegant. In other cases, I would say that are elegant, but I don't know that this applies here. For sure, it has some of the most beautiful art that I've ever seen in a game, because it is art. So you have very beautiful, unique cards, large cards, tarot sides, with actual art from the past. And sometimes it's upside down, I know, I wish they printed it the other way. Just kidding, just kidding, I know it's me that has the card upside down. You never know. So cards will have individual works of art printed on them and symbols indicating the kind of art that it is, such as sculpture, still life, etchings, landscape, for example. Some of these symbols, however, are kind of blank, almost like reverse, and they represent a work of art being on loan. We will see what that means. So this is a betting game. Basically, each round there will be cards that will be placed around the board in preparation for different kinds of exhibits. And as the round progresses and we place cards around the board in different sections matching the kind of art that is, so this one, for example, will go here. As we do so, we also place tokens around the board in the corresponding sections, betting on how many cards of each category we think will be there at the end of the round. Which is why each player has a set of betting tokens. Most are regular, and then there is a special one called high risk. And then we have scoring tokens that are used to keep track of our score. Hey, I scored 3 points in landscapes, and I got 1 point in sculpture and 5 in still life, for example. That's how these scoring tokens work. But again, the real heart here is the betting tokens. Now, at the beginning of each round, we draw 2 cards randomly and place them in the corresponding sections, like in this case, landscape and still life. Then each player will receive a hand of cards. The number changes based on the number of players, but it is always an odd number because each turn of the round you will play 2 cards and 1 will be left and discarded at the end of the round. After we distribute cards and place 2 cards here, then the round starts, and there are 3 separate phases. One is like an initial bet, in which players will look at their hand of cards, which may or may not give them a lot of information. For example, if you have a lot of cards in one category, then you know that there are chances that the category will be well represented at the end of the round. In this case, I can count on, well, possibly a good number of sculptures being there. But it may also be that your initial hand has a little bit of everything, which really gives you no information whatsoever. You're a little bit in the dark there. After you look at your hand, you place your initial bet, which means you can place 1 or 2 regular tokens in a single space. Say I decide to place these ones in that space there on the sculpture section. And you can also place your high risk. That's the only time where you can place your high risk. So because of the high risk in your initial betting phase, you can have 1, 2, or 3 tokens in a space. After everybody places their initial bet, or I should say has the option of placing their initial bet, then we start the main rounds. During the main rounds, each player will play 2 cards, and after you play them, you simply place them next to the corresponding space. So, for example, that player places those cards there, and the next player does that, and the next player does this, and then it's back to me. Oh, that's an interesting one. The reverse pattern. When you place a reverse pattern in an area that already has cards of that kind, after basically you show it and you place it, you remove itself any card of the same type. So that was the situation. I played this card. The The Art on Loan removes itself and another card of that type. You can also play an Art on Loan in an area that doesn't have any cards of that type yet. Think of it as an antimatter ambush. That's a very technical term, because it means that next time, as soon as somebody plays a card of that type, they're both removed again. So the Art on Loan allows you to make things a little more unpredictable. So that is the main, those are the main turns in which you just go around the table sequentially and play 2 cards. And you continue like this until each player has 3 cards left in hand. The last turn of the round is played differently, which means everybody chooses 2 cards at the same time. They commit to that one, the other one is discarded face down. And then everybody reveals those cards, and again, they go where they need to go, and possibly if they are works on loan, they remove cards from there. When you're playing your cards, other than during the last turn, you always also have during your turn the option of placing 1 or 2 discs in a certain location. Again, the location needs to be empty, so it's definitely first come, first serve, and you can always place 1 or 2 discs. So at the end of the round, there will be cards in different sections, and there will be betting tokens there. That is when we resolve at that point we resolve the betting tokens and possibly score points. Now, you can see that each gallery, each section is divided into 2 areas. So one with numbers from 1 to 4 and a minus next to it, and then 5 to 8 and a plus next to it. That means if you have placed your betting tokens on this side, you will score points if the number of artworks there is equal to or lower than your bet. So, for example, this player will score if at the end of the round there are 4 or fewer cards, which happens to be the case. And you score the number of points indicated there, which is 1 at that point, multiplied by how many tokens you have there. If that player plays 2 there, then there would be 2 points. Suppose that this is the situation, then that player is correct. There are 3 or fewer, 2 points per token. Now that player scores 4 points. If you place your bet on that side of the gallery, then you score if the number of cards is equal to or higher than. That's what the plus means. And I wish they use the mathematical symbol, the little semi-triangle laying on the side. That's a technical term also, which means, you know, greater than or lower than. So, for example, this player scores nothing because there aren't 5 or more. Interesting thing, as you score points, if your prediction was correct, you get your tokens back. Otherwise, they are set aside. You don't get them back. So at the beginning of a round, players may have a variable number of tokens, which feels like a bit of a positive loop, not a negative one, because if I did well every time, then I get a lot of tokens back. If I messed up some of my predictions, then I have fewer tokens. So I score fewer points and I have fewer tokens. As the rulebook says, well, you still get your tokens back if at the end you have only 1 or 0 left in your pool. And the rulebook explains this way: if you have not many, say 3, you play recklessly because either you will score well or you'll get all of your tokens back, and so you'll start with a big pool as opposed to somebody who scores kind of well. They won't get them all back. As you can tell from my tone, I'm not convinced, and my group also was not convinced that that really helps. Because again, you can do okay, and then you start with maybe like 3 tokens, and somebody does well, they get all their tokens. Anyway, so this is in general how you play the game. Play some cards there, and again you have 3 phases: initial bet, main round, so playing 2 cards sequentially and possibly placing bets, and final round with 2 cards played by each player simultaneously. The game is over when all scoring categories have a score of at least 5 on them. And then that triggers, that ends the game. And at that point, however, interesting enough, only the tokens that are at 5 or higher count for victory points. So this situation would be the end of the game. Now green has scored 15 points. Pink is not scored 11 points, but only 7, because again, nothing counts here. And blue has scored 5. And then blue is probably me, because I'm terrible at this game and I lose. That's just how it works. So, this is the game. This is the game. On paper, it looks super interesting because it looked to be simple, clean, and elegant based on basically a simple idea, the trade-off, which is the earlier you bet, the less information you have, so it's a lot riskier. But if you wait until you have more information, then some of the best spots will be taken. And sometimes a trade-off that simple, I'm going to put some cards out just to make the scene look prettier. And sometimes a game based on such a trade-off, that's all it needs. You have some simple, elegant games that are based on a simple idea, and that's enough. Here, well, we all felt that something was missing, actually. Well, first there is a strange entry for a game that could be, maybe wants to be so simple and elegant, it feels a bit fiddly. 3 different phases in a single round, 2 different kind of tokens, the high risk. I just weirdly fiddly for a game that has a simple trade-off. The main round can be interesting if indeed you're looking at your hand and you're trying to mislead your opponents. Maybe you have a lot of the red ones, but you're waiting for them because you're hoping to see people that are bidding on the low end. And then you start dumping your cards and placing your bets on the positive numbers. It can be interesting that way, but unfortunately, there's no guarantee that your round will be interesting because you may just have a lot of cards, as I said. At the beginning of the round, you have cards that are all over the place, and then you really don't have... I mean, you can read what the opponents are trying to do. You can try to bluff. You can try to read from the bets of the opponents and figure out what they have. But you're really stuck. There isn't a lot that you can do. So, gameplay can feel both a little bit fiddly because of different kinds of bets in a single round, and also random based on the cards that you get, and still limited. Another thing that to me damages the game is that it feels longer than it needs to be for a game that relies on one idea, place cards and bet. Because it can take quite a while to play. Again, for a game that feels mechanically should be a filler. If this was 15 minutes, sure, no problem. But it can take up to an hour to play, and then an hour just doing the same thing over and over again. To me, that's not quite as exciting. Well, especially when you include the fact that the game does not have an architecture, does not have an arc, does not have an acceleration with later turns being more epic, with more effects, more ideas. The structure is rinse and repeat. You score the points, and then all the cards are shuffled together and you reset up the next round. And so you're really doing all the same thing over and over again. So alas, it feels too long and too repetitive to be a mid-sized game, which it is, unfortunately, in terms of length. We also did not enjoy the production. Again, at a glance, well, it looks really nice and clean. But then, I wish that, for example, there was room for the tokens, so you can place the tokens and still see what numbers are there. And in some cases, I guess, I see there's a -3 available, but 3 minus. But then when we're scoring them, we still need to move them and look around. The fact that they are facing different directions, I don't know how that could have been fixed, but somehow it just... Then scoring and looking around, so I score and you score. No, wait a second. No, that's like 3 minus, 3 plus. Scoring at the end of each round, again, it felt like it took longer than it should have. So ultimately, you have gameplay, which is very simple. It is the heart of what could be a clean, simple, and elegant filler, but it feels fiddly, it feels luck-based, and it just takes too long to play for what the game has to offer. So alas, we just felt the classic art, although it looks very pretty from the art, somehow it lacked a spark, it lacked something that made it truly exciting, and so alas, my group and I did not enjoy it too much.